Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us at today's event. This is this month's Impact Innovations Lab event. And for those who don't know me, my name is Carissa, and I'm the Innovation Coordinator here at Impact Innovation in Brisbane. I'd like to start today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands we meet on today. For me here in Meanjin, it's the Turrbal and Yagara people. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I'd also like to acknowledge First Nations people here with us today. So Impact Innovations Lab series is about bringing innovation managers together to dig into specific topics and learn from others in the field. At Impact Innovation, we're all about building a higher standard of innovation and commercialization practice and building professionalism in the field of innovation. And what better way to do this than to bring you all together in this forum here today? So for those of you who don't know us, Impact Innovation is an end-to-end innovation and commercialization consultancy. We specialize in innovation and commercialization strategy and design through to implementation and deployment. We work with all industries and sectors across the Asia Pacific. We help our clients take their best ideas and apply the best course of action. So today is all about barriers to innovation and all of those things that could be holding you back. We'll be hearing from a great panel of guests, and we'll be asking some of your questions that you submitted when you registered. And thanks to everyone who submitted questions. We'll try to get through as many of those as possible within the next hour, but also feel free to pop in any questions in the Q&A function throughout the discussions today. So let's bring in our panel for today. Stewart Bird is our first panel member. He leads innovation at Aurecon, helping the organization and its clients navigate uncertainty, anticipate change, and formulate actions that support resilience and adaptability. Aurecon's innovation team explores emerging trends to understand how they're likely to impact Aurecon, its clients, and the community to actively shape and build future-oriented solutions. The team's research and innovation initiatives are designed to ensure Aurecon and its clients are developing the right services, products, assets, and capabilities to thrive in a rapidly changing world. So welcome, Stewart.
Thank you very much for having me.
No problem. Our second panel member is Dr. Tracy Stanley. Tracy is a social scientist with expertise across entrepreneurship, organizational change, and employee engagement. She's worked across Asia Pacific and Europe in consulting and senior HR management roles. Through her work in multinational companies, she has advised clients on end-to-end innovation processes, coached individuals, and facilitated workshops designed to build skills in creativity and innovation. Amongst other things, Tracy is also a senior associate for Impact Innovation. So welcome, Tracy.
Thank you, Carissa. Lovely to be here.
Awesome. And our final panel member is Brian Ruddle, Impact Innovation's managing partner. He established Impact Innovation back in 2006, and he has a diverse background that includes establishment of innovation systems, development of commercialization strategy for new technologies, management of startup companies, and strategic planning for international development projects. Brian is also the chair of Innovation Standards Committee for Standards Australia, and he represents Australia in the development of the ISO innovation standards. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you very much, Carissa. Good to be here.
Awesome. So I'm going to start things off with a couple questions for our panel members here. So Stewart, I'll start with you. So you lead innovation at Aurecon. First up, could you tell us a little bit about Aurecon?
Sure. So Aurecon is it's a multinational engineering and design firm. So we mainly operate in Australia, New Zealand, and across Asia, mainly Southeast Asia. So we work on all sorts of big infrastructure projects, across, things like energy, civil, property, that type of thing. And I think we're around about 5,000 people across the organisation.
Awesome. So I'm keen to hear a little bit more about innovation at Aurecon. So let's start with culture. How would you describe the innovation culture at Aurecon?
Sure, yeah, I would describe it as, as pretty positive, really. I think innovation's really become something that we, align with as a brand and as an organization really strongly. I think everyone across the organization sees innovation as part of their job, part of their remit. And I think we're in a really lucky position, in Aurecon and as engineers, because we're working on, large, significantly complex, problems, sophisticated things that are relatively unique. We're thinking about how, new infrastructure is going to impact, the energy system. We're thinking about how different property solutions are going to change the makeup of cities. So we're thinking about these really complex problems. So a lot of the work that we do, innovation is really inherent to it. So it's really become really ingrained in how we think and how we do our work. So it's a really positive culture, I'd say.
That's great to hear. So another question for you. If I were an Aurecon team member, would I know what innovation means and how to access resources and tools within your organization?
Yeah, I think everyone has a general understanding of what we mean by innovation. So, I mean, at a basic level, we would define it as something that's new, that generates value. So everyone understands at least the basics of what we mean by innovation. And I suppose then across different parts of the business, people will think about innovation from their particular context. So most of the business will think about how to constantly improve what they deliver on a day-to-day basis, how to deliver their projects and deliver their parts of projects differently and more effectively, every day, every initial subsequent project. Then we'll have our client-facing teams that are always thinking about, innovation from the client perspective. How is what we're delivering to the client instigating and sparking innovation at a sort of a system or an industry kind of level. And of course, then our executive will be thinking about, innovation from the point of view of, business model innovation, operating model innovation, innovations that are going to generate a more positive culture around Aurecon, that type of thing. So I think everyone will have a good understanding of what innovation means within their context, within the organization. And we do take a very decentralized, democratized approach to innovation across the organization. We don't have, sort of small R&D innovation teams that, come up with new funky things and then try to push those out to the rest of the business. Innovation is open to everyone. So we've got, platforms that support that across the business, open to all staff. People can, post their ideas. They can post the innovation concepts and potentially access, resourcing, funding, time, materials to pursue those projects themselves as well. So very open, very accessible to everyone.
That's great. Another one is probably furthering to what you just said, but what's working well across innovation at Aurecon?
Yeah, I'd say, more recently, what we've been trying to do is, over the last couple of years, the innovation culture has become, really, really strong all across the organization, sort of internally, about how people think about how to do their jobs differently. But we put a bit more of an emphasis more recently on how we actually use innovation to open up opportunities with our clients and do that really collaboratively externally. And I think that's working really well. I think people can start to see how innovation isn't just something that's, stays on the periphery. It's not sort of something that you do on the side next to your sort of day job. This innovation can actually really align with, core functions within the organization. So in this case, essentially which we use innovation for, business development, how we connect out into the organization, into the larger ecosystems that we're part of. How do we align our strategic objectives with other parties, with our clients, and then, co-create, collaborate with them to generate new opportunities. So whether that's, through joint R&D projects, whether that's through collaborative proof of concept projects with clients, so essentially at the same time you're it's business development, it's market positioning, it's learning and generating new knowledge all at the same time. So I think what's working really well is people seeing how all of these stars can actually align, and innovation isn't some peripheral activity.
Awesome. So the next question, what would you say are the most significant barriers or things holding you back?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be plenty of barriers to innovation, of course. But a couple of the sort of the main ones, I suppose, are, a lot of the new technologies, the solutions, that's a lot of our new innovation projects are sort of built on. And a lot of the commercial models that those, that align best with them might not align to the traditional model of a engineering consulting company, where essentially, the bulk of what we do is selling hours, I suppose. So, when we're talking about digital technologies, we're talking about automation, we're talking about sort of continuous touch points with the clients through these technologies. Sometimes that doesn't gel that well with how we capture value, through utilization, through billing out our people, in terms of hours, that type of thing. So there's always friction there, I think. Another thing, particularly in, project-based organizations like ours, I think that project mindset can sometimes be quite limiting. We think so much about the project that we're on. We're not necessarily thinking, more further in advance to that. We're not thinking about the bigger problems that our clients or the industry might be facing, and then being more proactive in how we shape, opportunities to address those. We often are sort of too late, in the value chain. A lot of the concepts, the problems have been defined. They've been packaged up into a tender, and then we bid on that. So often we're sort of too far down the track to really make an impact with innovation. So that's always an issue. And so that's an issue with, shaping the innovation early on. But even once, something has been done on a project, and it might have occurred through the natural course of a project, even finding the time to take that, reshape it, generalize it so that it could be applied, in other situations, on other projects, with other clients, carving out that time, off project is always a tricky one. That's there's always friction there as well. So those are some of the things that we sort of come up against. Of course, there's plenty more, just like every other organization.
Yeah, awesome. So Brian, I'll bring you in now. You meet with many innovation managers every week. Do you have any reflections on what we just heard from Stewart?
Yeah. First up, look, Stewart and his team, they've built a pretty awesome innovation system. I know it's been a long road to sort of get to where it is today, but yeah, number one, it's been awesome just to, again, Stewart, you and I have tic-tacked over the years quite a bit, and but even just to hear you now just sort of explain how it's all coming together and everything is pretty amazing. But it's really interesting just picking up on that challenges piece, and I think that's something that we're sort of seeing a lot of organisations sort of looking at the innovation program from that value, and how to sort of really up the value that comes from them. And with some of the services-based firms, again, selling hours and things like that, we've sort of heard similar challenges where you've got innovative projects, but then how to sort of repackage them so that they then become part of the product or service delivery of the organisation to win more work or to branch out into other areas. And so I think that is always the challenging thing, but it's a good challenge to have. It sort of means that you've actually got stuff coming through too, which again is really cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but yeah, it's I think we're going to be talking again. The focus of this session is on barriers, and talking about different types of barriers or things holding back an innovation program in terms of what it can deliver value-wise. But I think Aurecon's getting a lot of value out of the system. But it, again, really great to hear about. It's always about pushing the boundaries and what more value can be generated from innovation programs.
Awesome, definitely. So, Tracy, I'll hand it over to you now. You've worked with many organizations in innovation and change management. What would you say are the top 3 barriers to innovation?
Thanks, Carissa. It was hard to pick 3, and I'm going to pick 3 that will reinforce some of the experience descriptions that Stewart's just given us. I guess I'll start with culture to start with. It was great to hear Stewart talking about Aurecon and how innovation is a part of everyone's job. It's very democratized. It's not something that's done by the R&D department. Culture can be seen in so many ways. It can be seen in team meetings and simply from the manager or the leader of that team being open to new ideas and providing enough time to explore them. And to recognise that it requires some experimentation and some risk-taking and providing a safety net or parameters so people can explore these new things, and it's all managed within, as I said, a safe framework. I guess the second thing is time. It takes time, and we can be so busy with our business as usual, and we need to recognise that we need to put aside time to explore new ideas. And that's something that Stewart talked about in terms of their process, which was the third point I was going to talk about. In any organisation, if you've got a new idea for how to do something, obviously, if it's within your own remit, it's easier to do it. But if you have an idea that has implications across divisions or across your client organisation, or as Stewart has said, across your ecosystem, what process do you use for taking that idea forward, for sort of developing an initial scalable prototype that you can test before you scale it and so forth? So I guess there's culture, there's time, and this process. If I have a great idea, do I know what to do with it so it can be properly sort of considered and tested and a decision made within some sort of progress framework? So those are just a few first thoughts.
Awesome. Thanks, Tracy. So I'll switch things up a little bit here. When you all registered for today's event, we asked you what your biggest barrier is in your individual organizations. We received around 60 responses, and we've categorized these. The most common barriers came from a pool of 44 responses, and here they are for you on the screen. By far, lack of resourcing is the biggest issue amongst this group here with us today, followed by culture and a lack of process. When it comes to resourcing, this included funding, capital, people, and infrastructure required for innovation and R&D. Stewart, what advice do you have for innovation managers who are grappling with the lack of resourcing?
Yeah, I think this is always, going to be one of the sort of the main barriers. But I certainly think that I think it's something that probably gets blown up a bit too much and becomes a bit of a scapegoat as to why we can't do things. I think there's many different approaches that we can take to resource innovation. So, of course, ideally we have endless pots of money internally, and we've got whole teams freed up to be able to work on different things. But I think this is where organizations really need to leverage open innovation, connect into external organizations to support and resource innovation. We do a lot of work with academia, and there are no shortage of university programs, universities' capability within them that are screaming out to do things with industry, to do things with private or public organizations. They want to be able to see where this, their research can hit the market, where it can be applied in the real world. So we leverage that. We connect in with academia a lot, and that gives us a range of different pathways to resource, our innovation projects. We engage with, PhD intern programs where PhDs come in and are embedded within the organization for, 5 or 6 months. Those things are often, backed by government subsidies as well. So it actually makes these sort of things quite affordable to resource. Not only that, you're injecting, new skills and capability in the business and new experience, which has a flow-on effect within the organization as well. People are starting to, you're not just innovating within the capability that you've only got in-house. You can inject new things in there as well. I think in terms of what Tracy mentioned before as well is, when it comes to funding and things, I think the main resource that everyone wants is just time. If people are actually allowed to, free up a little bit of time, there's a lot that many people will be able to do, particularly if it's something that's aligned to an area of interest for them, or a passion project. You'll get a lot of discretionary effort put in there as well. So just freeing up that little bit of time, creating a bit of a safe space, is sometimes kind of all you need from a resourcing perspective to at least get the ball rolling. But also, I think in terms of, one of the traps that we sort of were starting to fall into, and, luckily didn't fall right into it, was wanting to do everything ourselves internally, particularly when it came to, software development, and that was creating a whole lot of, technical debt, technical overhead, where it actually stopped us from continuing to move forward and explore new things. We were having to just service what had already started and what we're trying to build. So I think this is where things like partnerships just come into play. So in such an important way, it might be that you create something internally, like a proof of concept, to sell the idea, to sell the concept, to see whether there's demand, to see whether there's a market. But then think about partnerships, think about how you can actually connect with others and go to market with others, so that you're not taking on that overhead, you're not taking on that, that technical debt that's going to slow you down, over time. So I think going externally, open innovation would be my main response to resourcing.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. The second most common response was related to culture. So this includes a fear of failure and lack of buy-in from other areas of the business. Multiple attendees asked about creating a culture where failure is celebrated. And Tracy, it would be great to hear some of your advice on this, and if you feel that a culture where failure is celebrated is a necessity.
Thanks, Carissa. So yes, I worked for one organisation where they had a failure award, and having the award, at least, apart from whether you submitted or not for the award, just having the conversation to say we're having an award because we want it to become normal and part of our culture. So I think it's a good way to have a conversation whether or not people sort of submit for it, because they have to feel really safe in order to want to submit for it. Organizational systems also, they need to be able to support it, in terms of your performance review. If suddenly you try something and you fail, but your performance management system says that's going to impact on whatever remuneration or promotion decisions, that's actually going to speak louder than any messages that are on some website or PowerPoint slide or so forth. So it really has to be lived. And organizations, I think they need to have a conversation around how you make a safe culture where you can test things. I mean, we know that not everything is going to make it through our funnel. So how can we test the idea so that the right ideas go through and get realized at the end? So talk about that a lot, so people know that, it's normal, it's not exceptional.
Awesome. Thanks, Tracy. That was good. Thank you. Brian, I'm going to bring you in for the third most common response, which was a lack of process. By this, we mean a lack of clear stage gates or decision-making processes that mobilize internal resources to take an idea to market. What advice do you have around this?
Yeah, and look, again, processes can be those things you were talking about, and then broader about, just how the whole system operates in general as well. But I think when we sort of start looking at processes, it's actually a lack of decision making, if you like, or an ability to make decisions as part of a process. So we often talk about stage gates, we often talk about funnels when we talk about innovation systems, but a lot of organizations don't have funnels. They have what we call sausages. They basically assess ideas a little bit, and then they're in their system, if you like, and they stay there. The purpose of stage gates, purpose of process, is actually to remove projects that don't quite align with what the organization's trying to achieve. And actually stopping projects is a really hard thing to do. And that's why, when we go in and work with organizations, they often have too many projects in the pipeline. mainly because it's very hard to make a decision as to which ones should remain and which ones should be either parked for a little while or stopped completely. And so that's sort of one element, I suppose, of process, but it links back to those other areas of culture and also resourcing as well, because on the culture side, the process actually allows for some of that culture engagement, and Tracy was sort of touching on some of that as well, about celebrating failure and those sorts of things, and the process actually helps allow that to occur and allows really open conversations around we're stopping a project because this information's not working and these are the reasons why. Now, that's a really different conversation to actually, we're just getting lack of support for an idea, or, it just drops off the radar without a conversation around, well, what was the decision-making process around that stoppage, if you like. And so, we see a lack of process really impacting on culture. But similarly, picking up again on what Stewart was saying with open innovation, you need a process to be able to do open innovation really well, and engage with external parties, whether they're research organisations or external manufacturers or whatever resources you're looking for a particular project. But processes, again, falls into that to enable those resources to be mobilised effectively, because it's not often just that you're contracting resources, you're looking for more of a partnership type arrangement, and Stewart sort of mentioned that word. And again, that needs the systems and the processes in place to allow that to occur as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. So I'm just going to quickly hand things over to Chris now to ask some of our questions that we've received from attendees. So over to you, Chris.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris. I'm the Innovation Strategist here at Impact Innovation. We've got no shortage of questions, so thanks everybody who sent questions when they registered, and also in the webinar today. The first one is, we spoke before about value, and the definition of innovation for you, Stewart, is new things that create value. We often see that innovation programs fall over because they're simply not generating the value that people had hoped they would generate. The question is, how do you define value?
It's a very good one. Like obviously, first and foremost, if something is going to generate, a direct ROI, and you can see that there is direct revenue or savings attached to that innovation, no more questions asked normally. It's when it starts to become part of a larger project where it's more difficult to start to define the contribution into that larger piece of work, or when it becomes something that's a little bit more intangible, whether it's around, it's actually just helped our brand positioning in the market. It actually, gave the client a better experience. It's actually contributed to a healthier, more positive, culture internally, and led to more motivated staff, that type of thing. So I think there's a number of different ways that we try to track some of those other softer elements. So, through our ideas and our innovation development processes, that's where we're trying to track the more direct ROI type measures, where is it generating new revenue? Is it generating cost savings? That type of thing. But we also have a monthly all staff survey that goes out around, through the Peakon platform. And so then through that, we're constantly measuring, whether innovation is actually contributing value to our people across the organization, and are people feeling like they are supported, recognized for the innovative work that they're doing? Do they feel motivated by being exposed to new experiences and generating, new knowledge and capability through that? So we're constantly monitoring that. That's a monthly thing, and we can break that down by, region, service group, like right down into individual teams. So that gives us a rich sort of insight to be able to measure the type of value it's contributing to our people internally. But we also do a lot of regular client touch point reviews, they're called. And so essentially that's us going out to the market and getting feedback from clients. And that allows us to get, some of that more qualitative insight as to the value that they're seeing from our innovation efforts. Of course, it could be that, the client saw that the project team was just more aligned through an innovative approach we took, or, they thought something was going off the rails, but by changing tact, it brought the project back on track. So some of those things won't be captured in the overall numbers if you're just purely looking at the performance, from a numbers perspective. So we try to have a range of different measures to be able to, to track more of the softer things, the qualitative value that innovation brings. So having multiple measures, I think, is important.
Yeah, awesome. And we're about to release a blog, and one of the things on that around barriers is the concept of innovation managers being told to get off the stage. There's too much else going on. We just need you to get off the stage for a while. And I think that by being able to have that evidence of value across different areas of the business, and not just with customers, but also with employees, builds a really good case for keeping innovation on the stage. Brian, I will bring you in because I think Carissa mentioned before, he's on the chair of the Innovation Standards for Standards Australia, helped to write the ISO Innovation Management System Standards representing Australia. Value is a really critical part of the innovation management system. Did you want to quickly chat through the importance of value?
And I suppose it's sort of reflecting a little bit on, I suppose, again, some of the big challenges that we see within a number of innovation systems where initiatives get held up, if you like, halfway through the funnel. Because it's, coming back to what I was saying earlier, very easy to get new initiatives into a funnel system. But the blockage is often because it's not, like senior executives can't make the decisions or don't feel comfortable making the decisions around moving initiatives forward because they're not really clear on what value is either. And so it's not so much looking at it from an innovation team perspective, but it's actually more from a business perspective and a business as usual executive decision-making perspective. And so when we sort of help, if you like, redesign stage gate systems, a lot of our focus is actually on those decision makers who are going to take initiatives and then roll them out as business as usual, and starting to really understand what information do they need, because then that starts to really clearly define, well, how do they define value? And like that can be things like this initiative has an opportunity to generate $1 million in revenue in the next 3 years, for example, or it's got potential to help us engage with another 5 or 10 types of customers, or move into a new customer segment, or whatever it is, but actually being really clear on those things that are actually really important to them defines the value to turn it into something that's valuable for the organization. And if you're not aware of that, well, then the wrong projects or wrong initiatives are often getting selected. They're getting held up in the pipeline because the wrong data is being collected. You may not have collected information on how it's going to lead to new customer acquisition, for example. So that's, coming back to this term value, I think it's sort of looking at it again from the decision maker's perspective and what do they perceive that value to actually be.
Awesome, thank you. That's right. I mean, your definition of value heavily influences your process. Yeah. Your process is also influenced by culture, leadership, and how it's supported through things like time and infrastructure. It's that's what I love about the system approach, is that it's so interrelated.
Yep.
Tracy, we've had a few questions around culture, and one thing that came up a lot was change management. From your perspective, as you are a specialist in innovation and change management, how do you incorporate change management into an innovation program?
Okay, thanks, Chris. I want to build on a point that Brian just talked about deciding what things are most important in terms of the focus for your innovation project. And it reminds me of what is sort of the vision, the big picture for innovation in the organisation. And any change management program has to start with, what is our vision? And what sort of organisation are we trying to create? What are we trying to achieve? And what are our biggest problems? And they will give focus to, some of these characteristics for where innovation should be focusing. So what's the vision? What's the vision at the big level, and how does this impact people's daily lives, daily jobs, from where they are now to where they should be? And we need to be able to articulate that as part of our whole communication strategy. So what's our vision? What's going to be the impact in terms of how we need to shift? We need to communicate it. And I don't know, interesting to hear how Stewart, when you first started this innovation program inside Aurecon, what were the channels for sort of communicating where you wanted to go and how you were going to get there. For some people, there's going to be some skills required in thinking, in analysing, in testing, in defining assumptions. There's such a broad range of skills needed to do innovation well. So it's about identifying what those are and sort of think, well, where are we? Again, where do we need to be, and how do we help people to acquire those skills? And I know people often think about training, but if you get together some clever people and you have some processes, people can learn from other people in terms of going through the innovation process. And I guess related to this, I really enjoyed the conversation around multiple measures of value. What will be the KPIs that are the most important for the program? And I think that's an important question to consider, not only at the beginning of the project, but periodically, because it's probably going to shift depending upon what's happening in the business and what challenges are being faced. So vision, how you're going to communicate it, how you're going to live the values. It's interesting, it's good to sort of say, this is, we're going to be innovative and so forth, but what does live values really mean inside the organisation? And what capabilities do we need to support to make everyone in our organisation? So we've got a re-democratised innovation process, as Stewart said, have the skills and the confidence to be able to propose different ways of doing things.
Cool. Thanks, Tracy. And Stewart, if you've got anything to add to that, that would be great. But also another question that's come through of, if you're running these innovative projects, especially maybe with clients, is there a cost to the change that it might generate? Did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think as Tracy said, this sort of stuff changes over time. Like our, the vision at the start was really about breaking out of the traditional engineering consulting kind of mold, being seen as, we just come in and we solve these discrete problems. It was sort of, the idea was that we were trying to break out of that mold, that mindset, that's what Aurecon was, so that we had a bit more sort of permission, I suppose, to actually work more collaboratively with clients and open up those opportunities to shape our own innovation opportunities, our own future work opportunities. And that sort of started to evolve over time, really to more of a futures focus, I suppose, like thinking about how engineers actually shape, have the ability to shape the future, because the things that we are building, the things that we're shaping today will last for, decades, generations potentially to come. It will shape those future operating environments and the lives of people in future. So you'll see that starting to come into our brand more and more over time, but it also starts to shift how we look at innovation. It's not just around, how do we improve what we do today? It's actually around, what are the requirements? What do we need to be thinking about for the future? So I think when it comes to this sort of the cost side of things, one of the mechanisms that we take is, we are trying to build up our capability more and more in strategic foresight. And that sort of gives us a bit of a view of the trajectory of where things might go, what future scenarios might look like. And from that, we're able to sort of see, well, this is the type of, these are the types of risks that might be inherent in that. And these are the types of benefits. So you could actually start to calculate what the cost of doing nothing is potentially, and what the cost of doing something is. And, if it's worthwhile to mitigate a risk by doing something today, or if it's worthwhile to position ourselves for a potential opportunity if something was to shape up in future, we can start to make some better decisions by having that view of where we think things might go.
And another really great question that came through is, how do you check the validity of your innovation value proposition with customers, for example? So if you're there going out with these big aspirations for being innovative, how do you check that you're on the right track with customers?
Yeah, I think we do quite a bit of work in terms of that futures piece with clients. We try to do things as much as possible collaboratively externally. So whether that's from doing joint thought leadership with our clients and with industry bodies, that starts to create a bit of a shared vision and a bit of a shared perspective on where things might go or where we want things to go. So we'll soon be releasing a white paper that we've done with Goulburn Valley Water around opportunities relating to circular economy and what that means for the resilience of their local economy there. So we do that collaboratively. That creates that shared perspective. We understand what's important to them and what they see as a potential risk going forward. But then when it starts to get into actual development of new product solutions, approaches, what have you, we also try to do that collaboratively as much as possible. Doing that in the client context with the client, hand in hand, so that we're not going, cool, we've heard you say something, we're going to go away into the back room and tinker with something, and then we'll come back and show you. Yep. It's actually doing that as collaboratively as possible. And of course that brings up all sorts of things around IP ownership and all sorts, but we actually place quite a bit of emphasis on making sure that we've got the right processes, the right templates, the right engagement mechanisms, so to mitigate those things and smooth that path.
Awesome, thank you. Brian loves to talk about IP. I mentioned before the system approach, and a big barrier that we often see is when innovation is in isolation. You're the lone wolf innovation manager somewhere within a company, and what we do at Impact Innovation is underpinned by the system approach. The question that's come in is, when you talk innovation systems, are you talking tech systems? It is something very different. Brian, would you mind just giving a little overview of an innovation management system and how it isn't a tech system?
Yeah, no worries at all. So, look, the systems approach, and this is driven. Again, it's been around for quite a while, but with the innovation management standards, it does really take this systems approach to innovation, and it's sort of looking more at all of the different elements that need to be brought together to deliver value or outcomes to an organisation. So tech systems, innovation platforms, they're a resource, if you like, in all of that. But the systems need a lot of the things that we've been talking about today. It needs good leadership. What's the vision? What's the definition of value within the organisation? It needs the people, innovation teams. It needs to be able to mobilise the broader organisation, building into the culture side of things. But then it needs that the processes, if you like, in terms of finding ideas, analysing them, assessing them, validating them, getting them all the way through to deployment. And so that's sort of, at a high level, I suppose, all of these different elements that are needed for a system to work effectively. The problem, though, or the challenge, is that you'll have a perfect system, and it's a bit like we were just having a chat before this webinar, but people change. They have they leave maternity leave and things like that, and that disrupts the system. You have to bring new people in, and it may not be a major disruption, but it could be that senior executives change, a new CEO comes in. That could actually disrupt the system a lot more. And so if you start taking the systems approach, you start looking at, how do all of these different elements work together to drive that outcome or that value back to the organisation. So it's not just the tech side.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. We actually had two people ask that same question, so that's a good one. The next question we're going to ask is, it came up a few times, is I think this is in relation to a lack of momentum or maybe a lack of engagement, and that is, do incentives help to get better outcomes or higher engagement? Maybe Tracy, first your experience, and Stewart, in terms of Aurecon, it would be great to hear from both of you.
I guess, I have some different experiences and some different reflections on this. On its own, I think they're not so helpful. I mean, just, because people like challenging work and solving problems, and giving them an opportunity to test and explore new things is something that creates a great job. And I guess on that point, I'd also say don't underestimate the power of recognition. If you're doing all the other things right, you're giving people the time and the processes, and they know how to, then I guess it could help. I guess an example from outside the Australian context, I worked for an organisation. Actually, I've worked for two organisations with a very clear focus on patenting IP, and I know Brian will probably pick up on this. And so it's kind of like a KPI, how many things we can protect and create patents. And one organisation I worked with, there actually was a capacity for shared ownership of the IP with employees, which I know isn't an Australian experience, but that's again a bit of an incentive. So I'll stop speaking there, and I know Brian has more expertise in this area, and I'll pass the baton to him.
Yeah, no worries. I'll do the quick one, then hand to Stewart, because it'd be interesting to sort of see how Aurecon's playing with this. But yeah, look, the incentive side, you have to be careful that it doesn't create unintended consequences. Is probably the big thing. I think there can be some very good incentive programs around, but yeah, you just have to be aware of how it motivates people potentially in the wrong way. So we've seen incentive programs where you end up with a whole heap of ideas, which is great at the start, but then how do you stop that incentive program to actually do something with those ideas? And so it just needs to be thought through a little bit. Again, Stewart, I might hand over to you to sort of see, how you guys are approaching it. But I tend to agree with Tracy a little bit. It's about the, enjoying work, having opportunities, and learning, and those sorts of things often drive more engagement rather than, particularly monetary incentives and the like. But Stewart, have you got thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's almost some of the experience that we've had in the past, is on the flip side of that, where if you start to tie different reward structures to whether you're developing a new product or service, you can actually get people holding back their ideas, because they feel, why would I hand over the IP to the organization? So they're not actually forthcoming, and it isn't around that sort of collaborative contribution. So I think to your point before, Tracy, recognition over a reward seems to be the thing that motivates best. We place a huge amount of effort on or emphasis on telling the stories around innovation across the organization, whether they've worked or not. But essentially we like to promote people who have added to that collective contribution. We have a strong messaging around everyone has a role to play within innovation. It isn't about having the random Elon Musk in the organization who's going to do something end to end. We have things like our innovation archetypes that where we sort of go, well, which one are you drawn to? Like, how are you actually contributing to innovation? Whether it's just you're the one out in the market and you're feeding insights back, which becomes the fodder for new ideas and new design processes, or are you the one who's actually going to take someone else's concept but help actually turn it into reality by building something from it? We try to recognize people's contribution across that whole spectrum of innovation, rather than this is the single entrepreneur who has done something end to end, if you know what I mean. So we do place a lot of emphasis on telling the stories, peeling back the shiny layer and putting the spotlight on the people who have actually, put themselves out there, who've taken a risk, who have done something new, who've done, stepped into that uncertainty, and basically hold them up across the organisation.
Cool.
Sorry, Chris, can I say one little thing, just picking up on what Stewart was saying? One of the traps that we see with a lot of innovation systems is they try to embrace all the startup stuff. Sort of nearly like you've got this founder who, is going to be the star and go end to end. And sort of, that actually is a rare thing even in startup land. But a lot of groups are embracing lean startup and, entrepreneurial training and trying to create these, if you like, little mini CEOs, if you like, within the organisation. And it's actually a bit of a trap, I think, because, again, we do a lot of work with startups, and startups are a team sport. I haven't come across any successful startups that is one person doing everything. You bring in team members and skills and, all these things, and you basically, bring different expertise to be able to get outcomes. And I think that describes, really well, or Stewart just described really well that sort of process about different people play different roles, and it's about embracing those differences rather than trying to turn everyone into a startup founder, CEO type person.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. That was good. Good segue into next month's topic, which is around teams and roles and skills as well. We didn't get to everyone's questions. I'm really sorry, but we'll try and come back to you after the session. I'm going to hand back over to Carissa, who will take you home.
Thanks, Chris. And thank you all for sharing your valuable insights. I just want to move across the panel now for any final thoughts, reflections, and advice you may have. So I'll start with you, Tracy.
Yes, this is a hard one. I think I'd like to highlight the comments made initially by Stewart about the multiple measures of value, and how that's a really important conversation for any organisation wanting to build innovation system and culture process.
Awesome. Thanks, Tracy. And Stewart?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a lot of the barriers that we sort of perceive to innovation are often barriers that we're facing sort of internally. And a lot of the answers to those sort of things, or things that can help, is when you're actually connecting with larger systems. You're going externally, you're connecting with those broader ecosystems, you're bringing in new skills, approaches, ideas. So I think I'm a big fan of open innovation and being connected externally, and I think that can actually break down a lot of the perceived barriers to innovation that we normally put up for ourselves.
Awesome. Yeah. And Brian, lastly, you.
Yeah, look, it's been a really great conversation, and I always sort of enjoy these sorts of discussions about types of barriers and then how to overcome them. I think with a lot of the barriers, it's about coming up with clever ways to get around them as well. And Stewart's point about open innovation, it's sort of looking at what's the barrier. What other resources are around? How can we overcome these things? And so, even coming back to that graph that we put up before, and I think it was sort of resources was sort of the key thing. But resources can be found, and this is the interesting thing with this word collaboration. The way that we tend to approach collaboration, it's actually about resources. It's about the reason to collaborate with someone is because you're wanting to get access to their resource, and that can be their knowledge, that can be their supply chains, that could be their manufacturing capability, it can be their research capability. And it's sort of looking for clever ways of actually mobilizing those resources to actually help the organization. The other one is, and just touching on this point again about decision making. And that when you've got some really good processes in place, it actually helps with decision making. It helps with defining roles of team members and their engagement and things like that. And so, yeah, we come across a lot of organizations who are sort of just starting on the innovation journey, and they tend to focus on, we have to do culture. You know, culture is the first cab off the rank. And I know why that's a natural tendency to go down that path, but in doing the process part, the systems part, actually helps with that, bringing everyone on board, because they know how they're engaging, they know what their roles are, they're learning from others about how to actually find ideas, but then take them through a process to actually get them deployed, getting value back into the organization. And so having those processes or systems in place is really, really important to get sustainable sort of change happening in the organization and outcomes as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. So lastly, as a token of our appreciation, Stewart and Tracy, Impact Innovation is going to make a $100 donation to a charity of your choice. Who would you like to support today? Tracy? Oh, so we'll start with Stewart.
That's very generous of you. I'd like it to go to Diabetes Australia, please. Having grown up with some friends who had juvenile diabetes, it's always a go-to for me.
Wonderful. Thanks, Stewart. And Tracy?
I'd like it to go towards the Chameleon Regional Community Housing that provides safe and affordable housing for young people.
Perfect. Thanks, Tracy. So that's all that we have time for today. So thank you all to our speakers, but please do join us again for next month's lab event. We'll be sending out the details on that one shortly, so keep an eye out. Impact Innovation has also opened their waiting list for the next ISO Innovation Management System Standards training course. That's a mouthful. This is an excellent course for anyone interested in aligning your innovation efforts within your company to the world's best practice. So we'll send a link to the wait list in our follow-up email for you all. We'll also be sending up a follow-up survey, so if you could please take a few minutes to fill it out so that we can make these sessions the best they can be for all of you. And the next lab event will take place early October, and it will be about teams and skills as mentioned previously. But thanks again to our amazing panel for all of your insights and their time today. We'll see you at the next one. So thanks again.
Thank you very much, all. Thanks for having me.
Yep, thanks for that.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Melissa. Thanks, everyone.